Well, we know that property developers can smell an opportunity, and the Premier's new housing reforms have set off a frenzy, and homeowners across Sydney are in their sights. Under Chris Minns's controversial changes, single home blocks across New South Wales or R2 residential areas will be able to be redeveloped into dual occupancies. Single home blocks near transport hubs and town centres can be turned into terraces, townhouses or two-storey apartments. Medium density zones within 800 metres of transport hubs and shops can be replaced with buildings of between 3 and 6 stories. So developers can see the dollar signs, and they're getting on the front foot. Now, we've received a few of the letters that have been sent to homeowners, and the language would make you think that it's already a done deal. For example, a letter here from Landmark Group tells locals, "We have already secured homes in your area. We're now driving the process." Another company, HighCorp, says the team at HighCorp would love to start by understanding your personal situation. We would love to work with you around your specific circumstances. Another developer, Knight Frank, says, "We understand your property is within 400 metres of Kalara train station. We'd like to have a constructive conversation to see how we can assist." Alister Henskens is the Liberal MP who is leading the fight against Chris Minns's planning changes, and the Shadow Attorney-General and member for Wahroonga joins me live in the studio. Alister Henskens, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben, and thank you for having me on. It's less than a month now until Chris Minns is going to do the biggest rezoning in New South Wales history. And this is a rezoning that is all about putting property developers before people, communities and neighbourhoods.
Okay, if you receive one of these letters, there'd be some people doing handstands. We need to make that point. They'd be seeing the dollar signs. They'd be seeing the opportunities.
That's true. But what really concerns me is some of the high-pressure techniques that are being used by these property developers on sometimes old and vulnerable people and residents. I mean, we're seeing emails being sent to people, people's letterboxes are being flooded with letters, and they're door-knocking streets. And if the people aren't home, they're leaving business cards saying, "Please tell us that, talk to us about selling your property."
I'm just reading this one from HighCorp. The New South Wales Government plans to change your property's development potential and value by April 2024. We would like to discuss the potential acquisition of your property. So there would be some people reading this thinking that they don't have a choice, but they do have a choice. They can say no.
They definitely have a choice. And it's interesting, one of the letters has that the property developers are now driving this process. If you ever needed confirmation that this is a policy about property developers and not people, that's it. The property developers are saying it themselves.
We spoke to the co-owner of Roseville Cinemas on Friday. She received one of these notes from the developers and she said, "Look, tell them they're dreaming. We're not going anywhere." And you consider the history of a location like those cinemas at Roseville. You know the history pretty well, right?
That Roseville cinema was the place where there were big community gatherings cheering off the volunteers in the First World War. There's an incredible amount of history that is being destroyed here in these property changes.
You know what's interesting? These developers, Landmark Group, Knight Frank and also HighCorp, we've written to all of these people who've sent out these letters. None of them want to come on the radio and talk about it. Now, we've even said to them, surely this is an opportunity for you as property developers to talk to all of these wonderful Sydney residents who might have properties that you want. They want to be able to have these conversations quietly behind the scenes. None of them have taken up the opportunity to talk about it publicly. Why would that be, do you think?
I'm really worried about the way in which they're going to try and exploit people. What they try and do is get people to sign an option, which locks them into a price and a buyer that they have to deal with. And I'd really encourage people who are listening to your program, Ben, do not sign anything without getting independent financial and legal advice so that you're not being ripped off.
Okay, we're talking to Alister Henskens, who is the Shadow Attorney-General and on behalf of the Liberal Party has been pushing back hard against these planning changes. Paul Scully, the Planning Minister, has weighed in on the changes over the weekend. He was in the Telegraph, and I'm not sure that he knows how to sell a product because he was trying to sell the idea of these planning changes for the people of New South Wales. And he's tried to say that backyards aren't as important as they used to be.
I think he's so out of touch, Ben. I mean, the great memories you have of your kids growing up, kicking the balls, hitting the bat and ball, playing cricket in the backyard. He doesn't seem to understand the importance of kids growing up in an environment where they can kick a ball or hit a ball with their parents, with their friends, with their siblings. I mean, it is the way in which memories are created. And can I just say this, Ben, that the New South Wales Strata Commissioner said only a few weeks ago that under Chris Minns' policy of going up rather than out, there are going to be an additional 2 million people living in apartments in the next 16 years in Greater Sydney. 50% of people will be living in apartments rather than in a conventional home with a backyard.
Okay, Paul Scully says the quarter-acre block with the Hills hoist to dry the washing is now being replaced by the clothes dryer.
He seems to think that the only utility of a backyard is a Hills hoist. It's incredibly out of touch.
I thought the clothes dryer was invented about 100 years ago.
It is, and certainly the epicentre of the backyard is not the Hills hoist.
He also says working parents have less time and older people don't want to be trapped in a house that no longer functions for them. Now, that may be the case, but as I've learned, that might change later in life when the grandkids come along and the grandkids want to go over to Nana and Pa's to play.
Absolutely. One of our neighbours actually made that exact point, that they were going to hang on to their house so that the grandchildren could come along, and now they're feeling pressured to sell. These pressure tactics are all about, if you don't sell, you're going to miss out. You could have an ugly 6 or 7-story building next to your home.
It's revealed in this Telegraph profile that Paul Scully, the minister, has no children, but he does have nieces and nephews, so he's got some understanding about the needs when children are around. He's also revealed that he's had to give up one of his great loves, and that is smoking meat. So 9 hours smoked ribs. He used to be able to do it in the backyard. Now he's in an apartment. He can't do it anymore.
Well, that's never been something I've done in my backyard, although I do know that Dom Perrottet is a great fan of the smoked meat. But, Ben...
But a lot of people don't want to give these things up.
If
that's your love, if that's the thing that you're into, if you love the low and slow on the meat, and I've got lots of mates who are the same as Dom or Paul, and they're right into it. If that's what you love, you don't want to give that stuff up.
Or the fire pit. I mean, there are a lot of emotional attachments to people's backyard. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Ben, the important thing is that, yes, we need to address housing affordability and housing supply. The real point is that this is a one-size-fits-all open slather for property developers without actually addressing the complexity of the issue. There's a better way to do this than what's being done. And I must say, Ben, Chris Minns has met since the election and the announcement of this policy 20 times with property developers or people advocating for property developers, but there's been not one bit of community consultation. There's been not one bit of meeting with actual people that are going to be impacted by these policies.
Paul Scully, the minister, says it's only a small sacrifice to give up the smoker in the backyard.
This is a massive impact on communities. It's going to break up communities and neighbourhoods, these policies. It's far more important than that so-called small sacrifice. We're talking about heritage, we're talking about trees, we're talking about communities, we're talking about the backyard. These are all incredibly important things.
Good to see you, and thanks for coming in the studio.